Yes, it is I, the Dalek Emperor. Welcome to another Dalekcast, where today we have a lot of questions here today. Our first question comes from, Dylan Stollensberger. Can you fight off the toy maker? I've already done that, yes. How do you make Dalek ships? Speaking of ships, is that ship... wait, what? Hold on. How do you make Dalek ships? Speaking of ships, Dalek ships, is that your ship right next to me? Oh God. Pull. Okay, so next video is Parody Freak Kaiju. Slowly I turned. What is that? I have no idea what that is. Anyway, so we have some reactions, well, some video ideas from Olbeding'S. Okay, very well. So, right. Could you please react to Season 1 of Blunt Brothers Godzilla vs. Monkey? Yes, I assume this is relating to Godzilla vs. Kong. It's a parody. Yeah, by the looks of it, yeah, I'll have a look at it. Yeah, I'll definitely watch those. Maybe on Tuesday, if I get the time. Anyway, so, let's move on now, shall we? So, we have two videos here, made by, Penny. These ones are War of the Worlds explained videos. They are 18 minutes long, and, yeah, they're 18 minutes long, so I don't know what to expect from this, but I am interested to see. First one is called War Machines, and the next one is a Jeff Wayne tripod explain video. All credit will go to Pop Penny. Let's have a look at them now. All credit, let's observe. Okay, so here are the two videos I need to look at. The first one is a War Machines video. Okay, let's have a look now. Yeah, I already explained it, so let's have a look.
The War Machines are the primary weapon and mode of transport utilized by invaders from Mars to wage the War of the Worlds against humanity. In George Powell's 1953 classic, designed by the
I haven't actually seen the 50s version of War of the Worlds, but if you could tell me in the comments below what it's about, please tell me. I assume it's the same, but...
director, Japanese-born Albert Nozaki. These war machines are easily, I would say, the most powerful and ruthless versions of the fighting machines from H.G. Wells' original story. Arriving from Mars in large meteorite-like capsules, their aim is to exterminate the human race with the goal of taking over the planet for themselves. Being forced to leave Mars due to its harsh environment, it's imperative to these invaders that any resistance to them is utterly crushed, and as a result, their methodical machines are equipped to handle any threat humanity is able to throw at them.
Yes, they were defeated by birds.
Force field, described in the film as a protective blister, the war machines are invulnerable to humanity's most powerful weapons, even the atomic bomb, which are unable to touch them. Already this demonstrates that they're far more powerful than the fighting machines from the novel, that have no such protection and can be hit by artillery and naval cannon fire. While the war machine's force fields may entirely protect them from any outside offences. The 1988
There's the
TV
TV
series, which is a direct sequel to the 1953 film, yes, that's a thing that exists, and lasted for 44 episodes, shows that, spoiler alert for the first episode, that their force fields only protect their exteriors, and even when fully activated, the war machines can be destroyed from the inside. For example, if a bomb is planted from the machine's interiors. It's also worth noting that seemingly their shields work directly one way, as their own weapons are able to pass through them with no problem. Well, that was an initial assumption of mine, but actually just now taking a closer look at when they're destroyed from the inside, we can see that their protective blister actually contains the detonation within itself until the war machine generating the shield succumbs to the explosion, meaning the 1988 TV show reveals that it's not a one-way shield, leading us to the conclusion that the reason their weapons are able to pass through is likely simply due to the type they are, whether that be perhaps them being energy weapons or just Martian technology in general. And speaking of their weapons, as their name suggests, these machines were built for war, and consequently are not only able to absorb essentially every human offensive capability, but are also able to dish out their own as well, thanks to their extremely advanced weaponry. A prime example of this is their terrifying heat ray, mounted like a cobra's head on a flexible swan-like neck. Two of the many natural inspirations that the war machines purport. When designing these ships, an effort was made to avoid the stereotypical flying saucer look of UFOs. Looking at you, Instead, Albert Nozaki...
we definitely also didn't make... We made saucers. We made saucers, yes. We know... A little bit generic, but what do you want? Did you want us to use the Imperial shuttles? Heck no. The Imperial Dalek ships? Hell no. I would not want to use those things.
He gave them a sinister manta ray shape, tipped off with a green window at the front through which the Martians observe their surroundings, apparently. It really is an incredibly beautiful design that's so fantastically sleek and futuristic that it easily holds up very well today as the concept of an alien craft from a more technologically advanced civilization.
The official Star Trek collection Bible books. We offer a large selection.
Masterpiece of science fiction design, I would say. And I think a massive part of that is the shape. The shape itself is so unique and iconic, which is heralded by the fact that the Tom Cruise versions in the 2005 Steven Spielberg film clearly took great inspiration from that shape. The overhead silhouette is basically just a stretched out version, showing how imprinted this design was by that point. It reminds me slightly of the shape of the wings of a Spitfire, with how slick and elegant it is. And I also suspect the copper colour enhances the futuristic feel of them immensely, especially with that level of sleekness with barely a seam on it. It suggests an advanced alien level of design and construction. Back to the weaponry though, one thing that I find funny about the war machines is how the positioning of their weapons completely changes the words we use to describe this ship. I suspect contributing to this is probably the fact that they don't have physical legs, and I'll have a video specifically going into why these Martian vessels aren't traditional three-legged tripods like in the book. So if you'd be interested in that, like this video, as that means YouTube is more likely to recommend it to you. Continuing on, this section here, which on these we call the body, is generally referred to as the head on most other tripod interpretations, while what we label as the head on the war machines to which the heat ray projector is mounted would normally be called the arm holding the heat ray, I guess. Which is quite funny to me, like just positioning the arm so it's above and centered and suddenly it becomes the head. Although interestingly, I did notice that this picture of Albert Nozaki shows what seems to be an earlier design, where the neck is placed further back. It looks more like a scorpion's tail here, and makes me wonder if this version had been used, whether it would be known as the tail, or if we would still call it a head. To me, somehow simply it being pushed back slightly really makes the body far more prominent, and the neck seems more like an attachment, more like an arm or tail, as opposed to the centerpiece, which is quite fascinating. Of course, another reason for it being called the head is likely the fact that, as previously mentioned, it was literally based on a head, a cobra's head, which is often what it's referred to as. This is also a fantastic bit of visual storytelling because it instantly signifies to the audience, just by looking at it, the danger of this extremity. And I also feel like I've always found it fascinating how this head is also kind of like just a miniature version of the body itself, in some ways. Of course, the fact that the cobra head is tipped off with a big electronic eye looking thing is probably a massive factor into it being called a head as well, to be fair. This was clearly inspired by an axe as a periscope, which adds to the warlike essence of the machines, what with it mimicking those on submarines. This single electronic eye is used for observing over and around obstacles or objects, allowing the Martians to have a gander at their surroundings without putting themselves in too much danger after they've crashed down to this alien planet, Earth. It shows their advancement over us, however, that it acts not just as an observation tool, but also as the primary weapon itself, meaning that they're able to annihilate anything that it locks onto, which in this case genuinely is anything. This isn't just eliminating threats, it's used to exterminate every human it can find. And locking on is certainly the apt term for it, as it's clear that it has a targeting system. This is indicated by the pulsating of the eye's red and orange light, which is normally relatively slow, but gets faster and faster when it finds a target, as it locks onto them before opening fire. Also, I just noticed that they even do this in the bar shots from the background too, which I never realised before. I assumed they only did it for the close-up shot, but no, they went to the effort of keeping this detail in throughout the entire film, it seems, as well as the TV series, by the way. When the heat ray opens fire, it's really quite a dramatic effect, blasting an intense beam of red sparks, powerful enough to destroy buildings in one blast. And although it's a look that's inaccurate to the heat ray in the book, which is described as essentially being invisible, I feel like the depiction in the 1953 film is how people would generally imagine something called a heat ray looking. It just looks like a ray that's intensely hot and would instantly vaporize anything simply due to the intense heat, practically molten. And one thing that I do like is the fact that it also accurately shows it as having the same effect as in the book, as in it's actually the heat that's causing the destruction.
Yes, I know.
Looking at you, Tom Cruise tripods.
Are very
we
weird.
Outright see
with how they use the heat ray.
things being ignited into flames, people getting set alight, and fire everywhere. It's so chaotic and destructive. Perhaps even more iconic than the look of the heat ray, though, is the high-pitched noise that accompanies it, which I think is perfectly described in an early script for the film. There is a moment, then a magenta-tinted heat ray screams from it. Capitalizing screams is very appropriate, as that's genuinely
also,
what it's like.
Who is,
it's such a terrifying,
I presume that is
noise.
Penny there, the weird Cthulhu-like creature. Interesting. I like the design.
Simply suits the effect extremely well and strikes fear into those it's destroying.
No,
this
really?
isn't the War Machine's only offensive capability, however, as they also fire what's referred to as a skeleton beam from their green wingtips. When I was younger, I think I found it funny that they had this extra weapon because they already had the heat ray. Having this as well seems slightly like overkill, quite literally. As if the Martians said, hey, you know how this thing is called the War Machine? We really should make sure it lives up to its name. Let's just utterly pack it with weapons. However, only now am I truly noticing and appreciating the ominous differences between the two devices. While the heat ray is a physically tremendously explosive and destructive weapon, the skeleton beam is actually incredibly insidious, breaking apart the subatomic bonds that hold matter together, cleanly causing anything, even tanks, to literally cease to exist with just a few concentrated hits. As they say in the film, when talking about a French city on which it's implied this has been used on, nothing remains. This is shown by the effect of the skeleton beam hitting something, petrifying it in green glow, which reveals the skeleton of its victim.
We kind of have a similar thing where we shoot enemies, they glow, they show their skeleton, then they fall over and die. We kind of have a similar thing going on there. But also, we also have a...
Fades.
I think we still do that, yeah.
Out of existence, leaving nothing but a shadow. The early script once again does so fantastically a job of ominously describing this, saying that the skeleton shape left behind is an echo of death itself.
Where, you know, the modern era of Doctor Who got the references from that laser, you know, shoots things and then reveals skeleton, then dies.
As I said, I didn't really get what the point of having the skeleton beam is, but in retrospect, it's really quite clear
when we
and
shout
very sinister. The heat ray is there
trigger a skeleton beam, basically, which kills the enemy dead.
Cause chaos and destruction, while the skeleton beam is there to clean everything up. Erase all trace of humanity, a very clean and complete extermination.
I'm liking your use of the word extermination. Interesting. It intrigues me on how powerful they are compared to Daleks. Daleks are stronger though, not gonna lie. But so this was 1950.
The peak embodiment of their quest simply for total annihilation, and the ruthlessness of the Martians in this adaptation. They fire their weapons in great flurries that reminds me of like using a PlayStation controller and firing a machine gun in Battlefield or something. I don't know why, just that's what their firing pattern reminds me of for some reason. Like there's a Martian with a game controller spamming R2 and L2 repeatedly in bursts. I've always found that funny. And yes, I literally rigged up War Machine to a PS4 controller in Unreal Engine just to make that joke.
You've got the 14th Doctor and First Doctor figures. Interesting.
Straight exactly what I meant anyway. Despite not being tripods in the traditional sense, the 1953 film still maintains a trilogic nature to the Martians, especially with their war plan which utilizes the war machines. 3 cylinders land within close proximity of each invasion point, and each one contains 3 machines. These are used to form a crescent shape on the battlefield, a formation that is anchored at one end. From this anchored position,
when Daleks begin attack, they normally form a formation where it's like a formation of probably like a cube area where they just attack at brute force. Yes, normally normally about 10 forms. There's like Dalek Formation 7 and all those other forms which are normally used in attacks against resisting enemies.
The Martians sweep across the area until they fully clear the quadrant. Then they anchor the opposite end of the crescent and reverse their direction, allowing them to cover a large area effectively, wiping out everything that's trying to escape from them. Complete organised annihilation. There's a reason these versions are generally referred to as the war machines, as opposed to the novel where they're usually called the fighting machines. And I love that the writers or whoever managed to come up with such a really thought out and ruthless explanation for this pattern of three. During the course of this warfare, they have other tools to aid them in securing areas as well, with yet another device designed specifically for observation. Again, a periscope-type camera lens probe, based on the Martian's own eye, that extends a great distance to descend into hard-to-reach locations, checking if their neighbours have got any milk, scouting an area for any potential hiding targets, or checking that an area is clear before the actual Martian creatures themselves enter the vicinity to investigate personally. Again, showing their ability for total extermination, that they're hell-bent on getting everyone, everywhere, and doing their best to not let anyone slip through the cracks. And I suspect that's why they move so slowly. They aren't rushing their invasion. They don't need to. They're more interested in making sure to truly annihilate every inch of humanity that they can find, slowly gliding along. You can run, you can hide, but eventually they'll get to you, because they're covering everything everywhere so carefully and methodically, which just makes them so much more menacing. They've got it all figured out. Or do they? The war machines may be the most invulnerable, deadly and methodical Martians ever depicted from the War of the Worlds. Yet, at the end of the film, spoilers, God himself comes down and utterly beats the living daylights out of all of the war machines. Wait, what I meant to say was, even they fall victim to the same earthly microorganisms that their bodies had built up no defences against as in the original story.
Don't worry, we will not get defeated by birds if we invade Earth. We are immune to those inferior things, to those inferior microorganisms. We're not going to get sick, even though I had some viruses, human viruses on a couple of occasions. But anyway,
actually pretty much the only aspect in which these 1953 invaders from Mars are weaker than the originals. The novel has this death occur after 3 weeks of their invasion, while in the film they die within just 3 days of their landing.
Yes, come on, really? Really, they're gonna die like that? Seriously, dude? Or did they?
Or did they? If we're going just by the film, then yes. But as previously mentioned, there was a 1988 TV series that was a direct sequel to this film, and well, it wouldn't exactly be an interesting show to watch if the enemies were already dead by the start of it. Instead, as the synopsis that opens I think pretty much every episode states,
1953, Earth experienced a war of the worlds. Common bacteria stopped the aliens, but it didn't kill them. Instead, the aliens lapsed into a state of deep hibernation. Now the aliens have been resurrected, more terrifying than ever before. In 1953, aliens started taking over the world.
Yes.
Today, they're taking over our bodies.
But that's a video for another time.
No.
So again, if you'd be interested in that, like this video
I
to
just
let YouTube know
discovered
to
something
recommend it
very
to you.
weird. Apparently, if you say like the video, it will trigger it apparently will trigger a response from the like button, making it all glowy and that. Why is that a thing now that I have to understand? I'm confused on that whole concept. I think the same thing happens if you said if I say click the subscribe button.
Universe, as while the machines and technology are clearly the same and quite faithfully recreated at that, there are still differences from the film that don't add up, I believe.
Okay.
So in general, I feel it's best to separate them. As it stands on its own, the 1953 War of the Worlds creates one of the most terrifying depictions of unstoppable Martians that generate pure hopelessness, simply due to their indestructibility and relentlessness. Their arsenal, a perfectly prepared petrifying primary periscope projector, powerful plasma projectiles, plus perpetual protective plaster, puts potentially pretty much all human militaries to shame, and is one of the best portrayals at showing how gaping the void is between our two civilizations. It's clear that the war machines live up to their name by their ability to wage the War of the Worlds.
Oh boy. Yeah, this is in Unreal Engine. Yeah. I'll actually test that out one day, with Daleks one day. Anyway, so we have this next video. It's more relating to tripods. Let's have a look at this. Let's save.
Jeff Wayne's musical version of The War of the Worlds produced not just an epic soundtrack, but also easily one of, if not the most iconic depiction of the fighting machines that's ever been designed, showcased in the concept album's legendary front cover. This phenomenal picture perfectly portrays perhaps the most visually impressive action scene in the story, with the Royal Navy's HMS Thunderchild being melted by the heat ray of what is generally referred to as the Jeff Wayne tripod, understandably. However, it's interesting to point out that despite this common colloquialism, Jeff Wayne wasn't actually the one who designed this fighting machine. During the course of creating his album, Wayne hired British graphic designer John Pash to work as the art director of the project. This was after Wayne had been displeased with work for the album he had commissioned from Roger Dean, best known for his work for the progressive rock band Yes. Wayne felt that Dean's ideas simply didn't fit with what he had in mind, as Jeff Wayne later explained in an interview with Den of Geek in 2009. We knew that we wanted to work with painters and artists that had an understanding of science fiction and the Victorian age, and the art director my father and I chose to work with was a guy called John Pash, whom the Den of Geek article keeps spelling as John Pash, who had an amazing understanding of what we wanted for the album and booklet. And to give you an idea on just how diverse his talents were and still are, he's the guy who created the famous Rolling Stones tongue. Yet, despite being the person that directed the overall design of the record sleeve, Pash, in this more, I guess, managerial role, also wasn't the designer of the fighting machines. But, of course, his contribution to not just the whole album, but also the cover itself was immensely significant, with Wayne saying, Pash designed the logo which says Jeff Wayne's musical version of The War of the Worlds, and he also introduced us to the traditional Victorian writing we used. He also put us together with other artists and animators, but they all had to be skilled enough to work with paint. They came in and we went through the whole structure of what I wanted, and then everyone went away, read the book, and all came back with ideas. So Pash had assigned multiple artists to work on the album, and those who produced paintings for the included 16-page colour booklet were Jeff Taylor, Mike Trim, and Peter Goodfellow. And as Jeff Wayne continues, it was Michael Trim who designed the Martian fighting machines, which started life as pencil sketches that I still actually have to this day, and eventually they ended up as finished paintings.
Exactly,
so
the Mike
really
Trim
I guess they should be called the
tripods,
Mike Trim tripods.
Indeed, yes. Yes. This is why actual artwork is better than AI artwork.
Trim pods, if you will. Prior to designing what presumably no one would have believed would end up being possibly the most famous tripod depiction in history, it was actually perhaps somewhat predictable that Mike Trim was on the path to create such a celebrated and renowned tripod, having previously worked on several Jerry Anderson productions, hinting at his talent for mechanical and vehicular design.
If he made Daleks out of concept art like this. Yeah, made
World War II, Trim started his decades-long career in 1964 when his father saw an advert in the newspaper seeking model makers for a film company. Beginning in the final days of Stingray, Trim would work as a model maker and designer for many of Jerry and Sylvia Anderson's series, including Thunderbirds, Captain Scarlet, J90, The Secret Service, and UFO. Most of which I remember from my childhood, which was many decades later, showing their enduring nature. Starting out in the model shop, Mike eventually became the assistant to special effects director Derek Meddings in designing the fabulous futuristic vehicles, buildings and look of Stingray, but did other types of work for seasons 1 and 2 of Thunderbirds as well, including model maker, scenic artist, designer and storyboard artist. By the time Captain Scarlet came about, Trim began taking on more and more responsibility for the vehicle designs, with many of those used by the organisation Scarlet works for in the show, Spectrum, being designed by him, including the saloon car, the maximum security vehicle, passenger jet and the helicopter. And man, looking at these vehicles now is really bringing back some memories for me. I remember having toys with these. His designs struck such a chord with the film crews that they were ascended from one-off parts to staples of the Spectrum fleet.
That TV show, but I presume it's good.
So impressed by Trim's work that when J90 came about, he gave him free rein over the model design work, as Meddings became more involved in feature films. Trim consequently took on the bulk of this for the shows, with Thunderbird's vehicles he designed, including the recovery vehicles, the demolition and object moving operator, and Skythrust. Mike's work also didn't stop at just the Andersons TV series, however. He also worked on their feature films Thunderbirds on Go, Thunderbird 6, and Journey to the Far Side of the Sun. After contributing a single unused vehicle design and model for the 1975 series Space 1999, he then moved into freelance illustration, which is when in 1976 he made his first sketches for Jeff Wayne's musical version of The War of the Worlds, bringing to life his famous fighting machine. And these sketches really reveal just how detailed Mike Trim was when it came to constructing his creations, carefully annotating his illustrations to clearly show exactly how it would look and work. One thing I noticed that's quite interesting is how his handwriting seems to drastically change between the sketches. My guess is that maybe people were having trouble reading his notes, so he started to make his writing clearer maybe. But actually it's quite funny because actually trying to read it, I found it surprisingly clear to make out, even in this slightly blurry scan, which reveals that already in these early sketches, he's even got the texture of the eye-like windows planned out, proclaiming that they should have a honeycomb structure, like the compound eye of an insect. Indeed, I feel like I say this for most designs. It's curious how many depictions take inspiration from bugs, but out of all of them, I'd say Trim's version is perhaps...
Hi, my name's Hannah, and I'm here to show you how students...
Yes.
one of the most
Something Sidney Newman would
created.
not like,
basically
because
like a big...
you know what Sidney Newman's like with bug-eyed monsters. Well, until the Daleks arrived.
Those bulbous fly-like eyes. However, it's interesting to note that this earlier version of the fighting machine shares the triangular-shaped eyes that only his design of the handling machine would retain in the final rendition.
Yeah.
In general, the body here looks far more sleeker and futuristic to me. The references to flies continues with his specification that it should have a segmented body shell. But it's clear, in my opinion, that Mike Trim was also heavily inspired by mosquitoes as well, with those what I believe are
very
indicated as
insectoid-like,
but especially, of course, the dangerous heat ray extending out like a mosquito stylet. And I didn't even realise until reading now about mosquitoes that segmented bodies is an actual like biological classification or whatever, and mosquitoes have that too. It also seems appropriate that he presumably took inspiration from both these bugs, as it turns out mosquito is Spanish for little fly. Though I think this is also the biggest criticism of this design that I've seen people say, that it's basically just a big mechanical bug and is generally considered to be a pretty inaccurate design compared...
Sidney Newman didn't like the idea of bug-eyed monsters. Yeah, well, when we came to the BBC building to talk about the Daleks, he was like, no, we don't want bug-eyed monsters in the show. But then we said, we can kill the Doctor over and over again if you let us in. And then Sidney Newman was like, yeah, sure, go ahead. And then we joined Verity Lambert and the others, Verity Lambert and the others, and we decided, sure, let's do this. If you can kill the Doctor easily, and the rest is history. We still have been able to kill the Doctor over and over again because he keeps changing his face or changing actors. Stop breaking before for me. Anyway.
H.G. Wells' story. Yet despite this, it's still massively highly regarded as one of, if not the best. And I suspect a reason for this is due to it being so strikingly featured on the iconic cover of what would become one of the best-selling albums of all time. Out of all the depictions and imagery that has been produced of the War of the Worlds, this painting is perhaps easily the single most iconic image to ever be created out of it. It so perfectly captures the confrontation between this large earthly ship being melted by the even more gigantic Martian ship. A perfect image to represent this alien threat and what the story is about, basically, this Martian domination over humanity, as fantastically depicted by the tripod's posture, is so superior to the Thunder Child, almost as staring at but looking down its nose at the ship, as it effortlessly melts it with such precision and perfect aim. And its legs look so firm and sturdy, yet wide and open, taking up so much space in its position, ready to accept the challenge, as if it's saying, oh, here we go, you want some, mate? What, you think you're hard or something? Come on then, you bloody try it on with me, son. Showing mechanical design prowess, Michael Trim specified in his early sketches precisely how the tripod would move. Writing, each leg would lift separately and then rotate at the shoulder, which are connected via ball joints stabilizing the
team. Yeah, it was like having like 3 things and there's like 1 thing at the back.
Strut, swinging the leg forwards, then lowering. The the body would remain on an even keel. An interesting detail that I never noticed before is that each leg is made up of 3 tubular sections with circular intersections, which from an engineering perspective, unless I'm mistaken, would strengthen it. Just the fact that he put that logic into it is pretty incredible. I also like the way that not only is the machine a tripod, but even each leg is made up of 3 tubes. This trilogical pattern continues, with each leg being held up by a platform that is Y-shaped like a microphone stand.
That's incredible.
It is joined to the leg by a ball joint, thus allowing the foot to assume any angle the ground may take. Specifying these details really makes the design feel like it's a real piece of engineering, which is what sells it, I think. You could imagine this actually existing and working. The colours used in the image are also so cleverly done to make the tripod stand out, with the background being shaded primarily with 3 tones, blue, white and what I just realised is the black of the black smoke, which I suspect is being emanated from what I think is a canister at the bottom, as Michael Trim specifies in the sketch that this is open at the rear. I've never realised that must be black smoke before, but it makes so much sense considering the scene it's depicting, and kind of adds to the hopelessness of the Thunderchild's heroic act, I guess, steaming into a fighting machine that's not only utilising the power of its heat ray, yet has enshrouded the background with its dark poison. Not only that, this also highlights with such retrospectively obvious clarity the perceived fight between good and evil here. The half of the sky that the Martian is proudly presented in front of being black, and it being black directly because of the Martian, represents its insidiously malicious intentions, while this diagonal split in the sky perfectly puts the Thunderchild against the half of it that's a heavenly white, representing the light of this hero and its sacrifice. And yet again, just like the tripod, the ship itself, at least partially, is contributing to that colour, with the smoke or steam emanating from it and rising up. Specifically, it looks like due to it being melted. So specifically, its sacrifice is what's causing the sky to be white, seemingly. Well, that's my interpretation anyway. Of course, it's clear that in the War of the Worlds, the Martians serve as a reflection of human nature. Their attempt to conquer us using superior technology is a mirror of humanity's nations doing the same to technologically inferior people. The prime example being the British Empire using its advanced, powerful Royal Navy to establish the biggest empire in human history. And consequently, I wonder, though I might be stretching here, that if the black smoke represents this malicious domination, well, the Royal Navy's ship is likewise expelling black smoke from its own funnels. Yet, despite this being a significant cloud, it is utterly dwarfed by that of the tripods, showing how insignificant humanity's biggest empire and biggest weapon, the most powerful ship of the most powerful navy, is in comparison to the invaders from Mars. Jesus, this is like what I used to write in media studies. This isn't to take away from the heroic act of the Thunderchild, of course, and this is displayed further by extending the front cover to include the back as well. The full image shows the steamer that the Thunderchild is sacrificing itself to save, sailing away into the now gleaming beautiful yellow-orange sky to safety. Notice the contrast between this relatively normal-looking picture and the battle going on, in particular just focusing on that background behind the tripod that looks like the depths of hell. There's further smaller details that add to the horror and personal heroism of the ship, by the fact that if you look closely, you can even see the people that are on board the Thunderchild. Some other little bits of trivia I learnt from Michael Trim's sketches include that these parts of the tripod, commonly depicted as being red, though actually in the cover image look pretty see-through, I'd say. I think the slight reddish highlight is a reflection from the heat ray. But anyway, these are noted as being, unless I'm misreading, the fighting machine's ears, which is curious. Indeed, the shading of the tripod in this image is something I find very impressive, as it truly looks metallic. And you might be thinking, well, obviously. But the reason I point it out is because, here's a fun fact, much like many famous pieces of art, there's actually multiple versions of this picture. Well, at least two. I think this one is an earlier version that downplays the symbolism, but arguably is even more beautiful with that lovely yellow sky being present nearly throughout. It's also interesting that seemingly originally the Martian eyes were going to be dark green in this picture, as opposed to the light green in the final version. The precise shades of green and the colours of the image as a whole seem to change somewhat in other images, though I'm not sure if these actually are more alternative versions as they are very close to the cover one, or if these might just be particular prints or scans of the same image that's just made it look this way perhaps. It's not just the colour change, there are some differences, just look at the skyline for example, so I'm not entirely sure, but either way, just look.
Level up your gaming space with metal posters from Displays.
Especially on the leg joints, at how the metal on these two versions is different, and how impressively metallic it looks on the sleeve cover. Not ridiculously shiny, but there's enough metallic depth there that you can imagine it in the sunlight as a walking engine of glittering metal, as the book describes. It's just very nicely done, I thought, and shows how skilled Mike Trim is, not just in design, but also in painting. I also found this version on Google Images, which genuinely took me months to notice that there's cats in the windows. I don't think this was Michael Trim's doing though. Decades after this image was cemented as a science fiction icon, Trim returned to the world of Thunderbirds, working on the 2004 film directed by Jonathan Frakes as a concept artist for a number of weeks. Among other things, he came up with a design for the interior of Thunderbird 2, but ultimately none of what he produced was used on screen. Despite this, his impact and contributions to the world of design are undeniable, as showcased in the 2006 book of his illustrations entitled The Future Was Fab, F.A.B., The Art of Mike Trim. As Jeff Wayne himself so perfectly put it in 2009. Basically, it took about a year to get the full artwork finished and packaged, but I think that they all created an image that has lasted 30 years. In fact, we have a full-scale Martian machine around 30 feet high in the show. That is based on the paintings, and it actually functions in a way that the audience actually becomes part of the show. It's really quite an amazing piece of engineering, but if it wasn't for Michael Trim and his paintings, we wouldn't have the Martian ship that we have today. Indeed, the fact that the War of the Worlds has had innumerable interpretations over the 125 plus years it's been in existence, yet this specific version is likely the most remembered and iconic depiction, is really an immensely phenomenal achievement that can't be overstated enough, and is a testament to the design of the Mike Trim tripods featured in Jeff Wayne's musical version of The War of the Worlds.
I agree. Is that it? Yeah, that was really good. I enjoyed that. Quite interesting. So they're not called the Jeff Wayne tripods, they're called Mike Trim. I liked all the symbolism in that. That was very good. Like showing the light and dark things. Anyway, my fellow subjects, see you all in the next video then, viewers. Farewell. Make sure you subscribe and like the video. All credit will go to you, Pup Benny. Let's see you on next video then. Farewell. Thanks all for the enjoyable video today. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official DALEK.